What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 253 of Two Amazon Sellers and a Microphone, brought to you by Sellozo. And today we are talking about your numbers, making sense of your numbers, bookkeeping, all of the super sexy stuff for selling on Amazon. And joining us, we're very excited. It's been a lot of fun. We've been chatting for a little bit, and obviously this is going to be good energy on this one and great topics. But joining us is April Hunter from the Beacon Rock. How are you, April?
I'm good. It's a beautiful day.
Yes, it's actually, you're in Boston and we're in Kansas City. It's actually beautiful here today too. It's the best time of year.
It is
Love the fall. So
very.
yeah, it's very, very, very nice. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I know that everyone listening, this is, we all got our start somehow selling on Amazon. I know Chris and I started. We took a course years ago and got into it. And then you get it, and you're like, oh man, I'm making sales, and this is so fun. You're refreshing your app to see your sales come in. And then at some point, you're like, how do I organize all of these numbers and what's going on? How much money am I actually making? What do I need to do? Then you got taxes coming up. And then you're like, I realize now I have a real business and I have to really start treating it this way. And that's where bookkeeping comes in. I mean, I said before when we were talking, I was like, it's kind of my least favorite part. And you're like, it's kind of the most important part, which it is for sure. So we'll be diving into all that, which will be a lot of fun, April. So before we do that, why don't I turn the floor over to you? Why don't I give you a few minutes and let's just get your background. How did you get into this space how did you get into bookkeeping and then targeting it towards Amazon sellers? You got the floor.
So growing up, I believed I was not good at numbers. But I was good at puzzles. And so I got a job as a trust and estate accountant, which is basically, working for really, really, rich people and keeping their money in line. And kind of as a side thing, I just started growing this like side pot of money. And, it started on like eBay and Poshmark. And then it was like, I just kept seeing all these people like making huge amounts of money on Amazon. And I was like, well, I know the fees are ridiculous. So, what's the point? And I hooked up with Emily at Crazy Flippin' Mom, and it all kind of has escalated really quickly since then in Will Ferrell sense. Like that escalated way too quickly. So just because I am an accountant and I have been an accountant for 15, 16 years now, I don't even, after you get past 12, it really doesn't matter anymore, I guess, until, I have been an accountant. So I was doing my own books for Amazon, and my husband also has an e-commerce business, but he uses WooCommerce and has switched to Shopify. So I had not the Amazon bookkeeping necessarily, but I had to do my own books. And Amazon books and bookkeeping is different, like not drastically different, but enough different that your local hometown CPA is not going to have any clue what's going on with your books. If they don't have e-commerce, any kind of a background, they're going to miss so much in your bookkeeping. And so for me, I just saw this really big opportunity that a lot of people were missing out on huge deductions and huge write-offs for their business and paying way more taxes than they really needed to be because they had no clue how to do their books. Crazy Flipping Mom is also an app predominantly for women, but it caters to startup Amazon sellers. So a lot of people who have started on that like MLM or Poshmark or eBay and made that same switch, and many of them don't realize that whole like, okay, this is a side hustle, and then it's like, oh shit, this is a real business, and I just got my 1099 and I never made this much money in my life at my W-2 job. And I owe how much in taxes? And it's really that you don't owe that much in taxes but you didn't do any bookkeeping. So you really have no idea how much you owe in taxes. And it's not as much as that 1099 says. So, so yeah, that's where I'm at. Is I saw a hole, and Amazon specific accountants and bookkeepers are really hard to find. So
I want to touch on that because this is, this topic can be very confusing as far as terminology goes. You got a bookkeeper, and you got an accountant, and you got a CPA. It's like, what do I need here? What do I start? Like, does one person do all three, or do I need three? Like, can you break that down a little bit?
Yeah. So a CPA you generally go to for taxes. So CPAs, they take a giant exam, and then they hold a lot of the liability and responsibility if you commit fraud. Like, their job is to make sure that your books are completely 100% accurate. And that is why they charge so much money, is because they have a lot of liability. They can lose their CPA license if you're up to funny business. You can have somebody do your taxes that's not a CPA. So there are different designations, and each one of them costs different amounts. So there's enrolled agents, there's public accountants, which is what I am, and then there's CPAs. And all three of those people can do your taxes for you. And really, it comes down to the knowledge and your business type. Some business owners are willing to take a lot more risk with taxes than others. And sometimes CPAs are not the route to go because they don't want their liability matched with your liability. So the IRS rules are not as black and white as everybody says. It's all a very gray area. That's why there's tax court, because it can go to court. And then, you just want to make sure that you have followed the laws as much as possible. So there's a whole range of CPAs as far as like how much they're willing to go into deductions and write-offs, and what you can write off and what you can't write off. And so finding a match of a CPA or a public accountant is really important. As far as the other designations is like bookkeepers or accountants, bookkeepers basically just do your books, send you some reports, and that's about it. They maintain your books for you. Accountants add the advisory into it. They are the translator of your books. So a lot of people look at these numbers on a page and they're like, okay, I see this top number, and then I see this really measly little tiny number at the bottom, which is my net income. And then they're like, where's all my money? Because that's not what's in my bank account. And so we kind of help translate all of those different numbers in your profit and loss and your balance sheet into, here's where you've been, here's where you are, and here's where you can go from here. And, here's your funding sources and all of that. So that's kind of the difference between everybody in the accounting realm.
Yeah, well, it's kind of this gets confusing, especially selling online, and you start to do your taxes, and you go to your neighborhood accountant, and she's like, "What is this you're doing?" You're like, "Well, I'm trying to sell online. I don't know if I can handle all this kind of stuff." So
yeah,
it makes it difficult.
Then it gets into sales tax too, which a lot of CPAs don't want to deal with either. So
yeah, there's a whole
that's a whole other
that's a whole other avenue.
I know that feeling though, because I remember the first year back in 2014, I started selling, and you're watching your disbursements come into your bank account, and you're like, oh, this is nice, and then you get that 1099 at the end of the year, and it is this monster number, and you're like, no, that is not how much I made. I have got to how do I whittle this down to exactly what I brought in? And that's the first time. So anybody who's new selling, just wait until you get that first 1099, and you're like, okay,
yeah,
that is a lot more than I've ever made, but I didn't actually make that much.
So even if you are using QuickBooks, and sometimes even seasoned sellers are making this mistake, is that you're just matching up those numbers that are being deposited into your bank account as your sales, and that will not match your 1099 because there's a big number in between, which you can get on your Amazon payments reports. It's the date range report, summary, not transactions, and it's a PDF. And that report you need to run, whenever you're doing your reporting, because like 30% generally is that number. And that number is not accounted for if you don't go in and make like the appropriate change to the number that is deposited into your account. So like your numbers are drastically off just with that little minute change. And it's like it's very much all these little nuances within Amazon and e-commerce selling of like these fees that are being charged to us by the platforms.
Can you just sort of, because you mentioned there's this need for this bookkeepers for Amazon specific businesses that you've taken advantage of. You've gotten yourself inside that space, but why is it so different? Why is it challenging for, a typical bookkeeper for a brick and mortar business or something else? Why is there so much difference between those two models, and there's like a learning curve to being able to do books properly?
A lot of it has to do with those fees that I just talked about. Your normal brick and mortar business, they don't have those fees associated with them. The most that they're going to have is like the 3% fee from the credit card company for processing. And that comes through on, it comes through as a separate fee pretty much. You can set it up like per transaction, or it comes through as a flat fee per month. So that's, taken out of your bank. And because a lot of accountants just go through your bank, they don't see this whole entire other side of the platform because they're just matching it from your bank to what came in as deposits. And there's like this whole third section that unless you provide them with the correct reports, they don't see.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that is what you see when you see that 1099, that huge number. I mean, that is your gross revenue, essentially. I'm assuming that I'm saying that right. That's maybe a different terminology for it, but I mean, that's all the revenue brought in from your products. And then, when you get your disbursements, you're not seeing, what's different is you're not seeing like the commissions and the referral fees and
Right.
FBA fees and everything else.
Yeah.
You have to account for that.
The other place that some people do see it, but they don't really know how to translate it to their accountant or their bookkeeper, is they'll have like Inventory Lab or their inventory management software. And that does show you what your Amazon fees are. But then it leaves off all of those extra fees that are not Amazon fees. So it's like unless you're having bookkeeping done or you're doing your own bookkeeping correctly, there's no concise way to really get it all in one place, because like Inventory Lab's not going to have like all your subscriptions and all of, like your extra, whatever research software you have or whatever groups you're in or whatever, travel you had. It's not going to have any of those fees in it. So if you have something that's translating you to a profit and loss, say like Inventory Lab, unless you're specifically going in and putting those transactions in, which it doesn't reconcile, so you can make big mistakes, then you have no idea what your real numbers are.
So let's walk through this real quick. So what does it look like when you start working with somebody? Somebody's a seller. They've been, let's say they've been selling for a year or whatever. They've just started and they're coming on. What does that process look like? I mean, obviously there's a lot you've got to go through.
So
right?
Generally it looks like a mess.
That's actually comforting.
So my best analogy for this is, and I don't know if you guys have kids or not. You know how your kids trash their playroom?
Mm-hmm. Very well.
That's what it looks like when you first walk into somebody who has no bookkeeping at all. And you have to figure out what the organization is going to be for that playroom. And then you have to start picking up and putting away the toys. So you put away all the Legos in one area and all of the stuffed animals in one area and all of the, like other various trains or whatever toys they have, monster trucks, like whatever toys. And then you just start moving things into the categories. And so it's not that it's impossible for everybody to do. Like one of my main things that I put out when I first started this was a how to do your own bookkeeping, because when you're first starting out and you don't know how much money you make, the hardest thing to do is to be like, okay, I'm going to go spend $500 on a bookkeeper per month. Like, that's a huge bill. Who's spending $500 on a bookkeeper when they have no idea if they're even making money? So I have a course. It is a guided course. So there's live Q&A every week throughout the course. I do it 3 times per year, and I walk you how to do your own books so that you can know whether or not you can afford a bookkeeper and unstraighten, like that whole disaster of a room and get it categorized so that you don't have those historical bookkeeping charges. Because historical bookkeeping charges, not only are you being hit with, it's going to be $500 a month, but oh, by the way, it's also, we're going to charge you for that past year of mistakes. And a lot of times the CPA won't take on your tax return unless they did the bookkeeping for you too.
Yeah. In your course, do you talk about what type of software is like the best to use to start out? I've heard A2X, I've heard Zero. There's a lot of tools out there, but when you start out, it's kind of confusing on which tool is best. Is that something that's covered?
Yep. So I use QuickBooks just because that's what I'm familiar with, and that's what I find is easiest to teach to people. A lot of people really struggle with QuickBooks, but it's it's very similar to Zero. It's double accounting. So I literally walk you through step by step how to do your books. We walk through A2X. We walk through Inventory Lab. We walk through a lot of the different things that are in there, and then I tell you how to either wean yourself off of them if you decide you can't afford them and you're not at that step, but your books are clean at that point, or how to kind of go forward. And then so it's a 90-day course. The second half of the course, we get into cleaning up your books and budgeting, forecasting, and moving forward.
And I'm sure there's at some point where I can just say, April, thanks for the course. I learned a lot. I don't want to do it though.
Yeah,
right.
There is definitely that option. And this is the time of year. So the course actually just wrapped up. So I'm not offering it again until January. However, in the past week or two, I have gotten several calls in that are like, I made a big mistake and I really need you to just clean this up for me, fix it, and let's move on. So cleanups are generally just a customizable expense. It depends upon how much you've been doing as far as a seller. Like it's very how many transactions you have and what's your volume. Because some messes are bigger to clean up than others. If your kid's playroom is the whole size of the garage, it's a bigger mess. It's probably going to cost you more money.
Do you like your ideal client that you work with? Are they mostly private label? Are they wholesale, arbitrage? What kind or is there any difference in those models in terms of the bookkeeping and the accounting of it?
There's actually a huge range of difference, which goes back into that, like why you need an Amazon specific seller or accountant is because within Amazon, there is a million different ways to sell on Amazon. And I have experience with all of them. Right now, most of my clients are retail arbitrage, online arbitrage type sellers, but I do have some wholesale and some private labels as well. So I have experience with all of them, but it does drastically change how you're doing your bookkeeping. When you're getting invoices in that are thousands and thousands of dollars, you don't have as many little pieces of paper in to your books, but you do have a lot more to match up as far as your inventory goes, and like your inventory shrink and all of the preparation for that inventory and your foreign taxes and your fees and your imports. And, there's many different ways that, you can do books for everybody. Cause it's, a million different ways to sell on Amazon.
Yeah, that's right. Well, at some point you grow so fast, you're growing, you're growing. You could probably miss something. Like I didn't realize I need to do this. I didn't realize California is blowing up my phone because they want something from me. Like what are the most common like areas? Like, because a lot of times, sellers are just, I want to scale. But there's probably a lot of things that we need to keep our eye on so we don't get out of it or whatnot.
So the first one, I mean, in the Crazy Flippy Mom, I'm constantly talking about this. I host a call once a month on her group, and I just started an Amazon growth community because I feel the need that there's this constant reminder of all that back end office stuff that we tend to forget, and when we need it. When you hit $10,000, you need to get business insurance. If you're not at $10,000 yet, and I know a lot of us are like, this is old news, like $10,000 was my first month, but you have to have business insurance and you have to submit it. Then when you hit the $100,000 mark, you really should invest in TaxJar or Avalara, I believe, for your sales taxes. Sales taxes is one of the most miserable things that you can encounter as an Amazon seller. And there are about 6 horribly nasty states that Amazon does not send information to, and they will come after you for taxes that you owe them and you had no idea you owed them because it was just, inventory in a warehouse that got shipped out. And you're like, wait, I had inventory in Illinois? I didn't even realize this. So TaxJar will save you. If you're at $100,000, make sure just sign up for TaxJar or Outlier. There are some competitors out there, but TaxJar is relatively cheap. And then other than that, if you're really averse to bookkeeping or you're really averse to any step in your process, I always come back to what are you doing in your business and what do you hate doing in your business? What is that thing that you really just hate doing? Don't trip yourself up by creating a bottleneck, outsource it. And bookkeeping is definitely one of those things that people hate. So just outsource it.
You was telling Dustin earlier, the guy I hired, day one, I still have him. So I've had him for years just because I did not want to do it. I was just like, I need to get rid of it. One thing that we're struggling with a little bit is this California franchise tax thing. I try to tell my accountant, CPA about it. She's like, I think you just got to pay it. So what is all that about? What's that? What's going on there?
So, California is one of those sticky states where it's, they want to charge you for everything. There's a couple of things going on with California. There's a Proposition 65 law that a lot of sellers are getting hit with. That usually results in a lawsuit. Accounting wise, there's not a whole lot you can do to get around that other than just don't sell items that are against Proposition 65. As far as California franchise taxes, if you registered your company as a California company, you have to pay the franchise taxes. The only way to get around that is to dissolve your company within California and move it to a different company. But if you live in California and you have any kind of business going on within California, your LLC is registered or your S Corp or whatever your business entity is registered in California, you have to pay it. It's like $800, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, and if you're not registered in California, so my LLC is not in California, but I do have sales tax registered in California. Is that franchise tax still something that I'm required to pay?
If you're only selling on Amazon, Amazon is supposed to be paying it for you.
Okay.
And it generally turns out to be a zero tax return. There is a section within Amazon where you can link your state ID number to the states that are requiring these tax returns, and it will file it on your behalf so that you don't have to file it. If you're just selling, a lot of my clients sell beyond just Amazon. So they do end up not having that zero tax return issue. But if you're only selling on Amazon, Amazon has paid the taxes on your behalf. So you should be able to just file a zero tax return unless you're buying pallets and merchandise out of California, tax exempt. And then you do have to, there's another place in there that you will have to do some more numbers in.
There's so much.
I know, right?
In the past, year and a half, there has been 100 changes to the tax code, the federal tax code.
That doesn't include all the state.
That does not include all the states.
Oh man, how do you keep up with it?
I don't sleep a lot. I also drink massive amounts of coffee.
So much, yeah. I mean, and you'd have more insights on this, but I mean, I know when I first started selling, I just started selling. I was just wanting to go, and then it was around 2014 or 15, and everybody started talking about, I think it's called Sales Tax Nexus. Which so it's like then everybody started panicking a little bit. I think all these states realized there's a lot of revenue on the table that we're not collecting. They started aggressively coming after it. That's how I got involved with TaxJar to begin with, because it's like, and they were paying the sales tax to the states. They were collecting it and all that. But now Amazon's doing that on your behalf for almost all the states. Are they at all of the states yet? Or not all?
They do it on your behalf for most of the states. However, there are nuances after you hit that $100,000 mark. And every state is different. Some states it depends upon like a percentage of your sales. Other states it's $100,000. Some states it's $200,000. Every state wants to be their own unique person, just like every millennial and Gen Z person. So just sign up for TaxJar because they really cover all of that very well, and they make sure that you are compliant in every state. So,
Chris, I know you might have had some questions, some best practices questions potentially. You still have those?
Yeah, I got some up here that I'm looking at. One of it was like, how do you know your bookkeeper is well advanced in Amazon and online e-commerce? That's obviously where you shine at. When you start out with the new seller, what's that like? Besides the obviously getting tax jar, but when do they need to go like to the next step? Like I know you said 100,000 probably to invest in tax jar, but like as they scale up, there's going to be certain numbers they're going to be hitting. When should they bring on a bookkeeper like full time?
If you're making enough to even consider going full time at Amazon, you probably should get a bookkeeper. If you're not doing your books, then you need to get a bookkeeper. Like bookkeeping is very necessary to any kind of decision that you're going to make. Like we're coming up on Q4. Well, how many sales are you going to make for Q4? Do you know how much you sold last year? What's the percentage that you're scaling this year? How much up are you from last year? And how much funding are you going to need for that decision? And all of these basic business decisions really come down to the numbers. So how much did you spend on your inventory last year for Q4? Okay, now you're going to scale at you're scaling at 200% this year. So you need to find funding for 200% of last year's sales before Q4 so that you can have that timeline to lead in. It's like if you're starting to have more financial questions than you can answer, you really need financial help. And sometimes a bookkeeper is not the answer to that question. Sometimes you need the accountant to translate that for you. There's a lot of bookkeeping companies where you can go get your bookkeeping done, but they're not going to translate those numbers for you. Like Bench does not do that. They will do your taxes, they will do your bookkeeping, and they will send you reports, but they're not going to tell you like, you need to go find $250,000 for funding, and here's your places to go find it.
Yeah, on that funding part, there's a lot of funding options out there. Anything that you recommend that people should just be looking at for funding, especially new sellers?
It really depends upon where you are in the selling journey. So many funding sources will not even look at you if you have under $15,000 a month in sales. And then it really comes down to, okay, so how am I going to find funding for this? And you kind of have two choices at that point. You can either be scaling at a fast enough rate where you can get an Amazon lending offer. If you get an Amazon lending offer or a Marcus line of credit, those are some of the best loans that I have seen in years. Of all the loans I've seen all over, financial areas. So I really do recommend taking those Amazon lending loans. Also, off the record and rumor mill is that if you have an Amazon loan, it's harder to get your account shut down. So
that's the only reason I kept taking those out because I knew.
Don't sleep on Amazon loans or Marcus line of credits. And that's kind of the startup area. If Amazon has not offered you that loan yet, it could be because you're not scaling fast enough. So you have to figure out how to scale faster, which usually goes into credit cards. If you don't have an LLC because you haven't gotten to that step yet and you're still running as a sole proprietorship under your social security number, then you're going to have to take out a personal credit card. And that's, that's just kind of where it is like, it's all about finding that money to scale. And Q4 is the best time to do that because you're going to get the biggest return on investments. And, like if you have to drive Uber to fund your business, it's going to be a really rough Q4, but you could probably do it. Other than that,
go ahead.
Helium 10 has a really good product for kind of that mid-grade seller, and then Sellers Funding has a ton of option. And then once you get up to that Sellers Funding level, there is massive amounts because people are like, oh shit, you can give us a lot of money. So I guess we'll give you some funding.
You just got to be careful with it. Just make sure it goes to the right areas. I'm gonna go buying a Tesla or something.
Yeah, if you are doing private label, you do have the option to go to the SBA and to look at grants. Normal online arbitrage and retail arbitrage is not looked upon kindly, and you're probably not going to get an SBA loan or a grant if you're going and looking for grants. But if you have a sustainability product, Amazon actually has a $20,000 grant for a sustainability product that you can apply for.
Interesting.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. Okay, so at the end of Q4, we're all doing our taxes and we all want to get tax write-offs. What are some good things that, like, as an e-commerce seller and Amazon seller, that we're able to write off that maybe are not the same as like a physical brick and mortar? Like, what are some things we can say, like, this is a write-off, this office space is a write-off? Like, what are some of those?
So as a business, you get more write-offs than you do personally. So, you have your meals and expenses. The past 2 years, the IRS has been a little bit free and loose with their meals and entertainment just because they wanted to prop up the restaurant industry. Going into 2023, that is not going to be the case. Do not be going and getting yourself Starbucks on the drive-through when you're outsourcing, or you really have to be on like an overnight trip or with a business partner, business contact to be using your meals and entertainment. When COVID was going around, they were kind of expecting you were eating out on your own because germs. So really lock yourself down on that going into 2023. Your business use of your vehicle. Mile IQ is really, really good if you're using your personal vehicle for business. It's just the slide of a button. It's like Tinder, swipe right or swipe left. It does a great job actually keeping up with like what the cents per mile is. I think it's 65 cents right now. It just changed halfway through the year. So you can kind of see whether or not your actual expenses for your vehicle are going to be more than your mileage. You always want to take the bigger number, and keeping track of that throughout the year is one of those things that's like, it's kind of hard to keep in the back of your mind throughout the year unless you're using an app like that. But it comes out to a lot of money. Your business use of home, you have to have a dedicated workspace. Your kitchen table and your kids' playroom does not count as your business workspace. It's always good to take a picture of that workspace. You want to make sure that, if the IRS questions it, that, there's no pushback on it. So when you're doing your business use of home, you get to take parts of your mortgage or rent, your utilities, your garbage, your water, pretty much any normal business type expense. So there's those. And as far as like outlier business expenses, pretty much anything you spend money on, you can end up writing off. If you are doing, like, say you had a really bad year and you made a lot of bad buys, you only get to pass through about $600 onto your personal return for items that you donated. So the rest of it, you just writing off as like bad inventory. And, that ends up being a big one in January, as all of those returns come flying in because, it maxed out their credit card and they no longer like it, So the inventory is probably the biggest one in January. At the end of the year is a horrible time to be looking at your write-offs and like what you can write off. But pretty much if you're sliding and swiping your card, there's a way that it's going on your tax return as an expense or a write-off.
It's good stuff. Kind of just a little bit in closing here. What are some crazy stories or horror stories that you've seen? Maybe there's somebody that you've worked with that did not pay attention to their books for a couple of years and now they're in kind of a sticky situation. Do you have anything off the top of your head that's like a tale of caution?
Not necessarily a tale of caution. Like everybody is, there was a meme or a reel going around tax time about, how if you didn't get your books done perfectly, you were going to go to prison because of the IRS. You're going to go to tax court or you're going to get a letter. They're not going to call you. And there's always a way to fix it. Usually if they don't allow whatever you said you did, they're just going to charge you the money of taxes that you would have made on that money. So a lot of times it's really easy to fix the IRS. You just have to show them proof or say, yep, I'll pay you the money. As far as like not doing your books for years, I have lots of people who like to not do their books for years and then come and ask for my help. And the best advice is to just not get in that situation. Like you can't be running a business and not know your numbers. Kind of like you can't be making dinner and not know what's in your pantry.
That's a great piece of advice. I like the analogy.
Throw things together.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of people listening right now that are they're intrigued by what you do. Maybe this is they're at this point right now in their business where they're looking for this service, or they're looking to switch or whatever. How do people get in touch with you?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is actually on Instagram, because that's how I decompress. But so I am April Hunter, Amazon accountant on Instagram. You can also contact me through my website. It is www.thebeaconrock.com.
Excellent. Well, we've got that scrolling on the bottom. We'll also make sure that we have all of that in the descriptions and notes wherever anybody's watching this, whether it's on social or whether you're listening to it on the podcast. We'll have this in the show notes as well. April, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us, sharing your insights.
Thank you.
I might give you a holler in a little while. I just recently added online arbitrage to my business. I was private label forever, and it's a different animal.
It's a very different animal. Yes. Yes.
So,
and I'm glad you thought that this was entertaining and fun, because, lots of time people are like, oh, numbers, and they don't want to do it. But I have a lot of fun with numbers. And my favorite part is actually the forecasting, budgeting, and like moving forward and like strategizing. And unfortunately, you can't do any of that if you haven't done your bookkeeping. So
definitely.
Sometimes you got to embrace it. You got to embrace it. You just got to take it in, especially if you want to grow.
definitely.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us, April. I encourage everyone to reach out if this is something that you need in your business. Thebeaconrock.com. Hit her up on Instagram while she's decompressing. You can just send her a message and in the middle of it, just slide in there while she's relaxing, and you can start the conversation. But thanks again, April, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. We really enjoyed it, and we'll see everybody next time.